Think back historically at the struggle for workers' rights. You remember that workers came together. Some of them were beaten, some were jailed, some were killed. But they said, you know what, workers are entitled to collect their bargaining, they're entitled to negotiate a contract. We will form a union. And as Keith indicated, you remember, we often forget, in 1924 is when women got the right to vote, less than 100 years ago. Now, how did that happen? You think it happened because some president signed something? It happened because women and their male allies struggled for decade after decade. Some died, some went to jail, some were on hunger strikes. And they said, you know what? In America, women will not be treated as second-class citizens. Civil rights movement. It has been going on for hundreds of years for African Americans before slavery, after slavery. And their white allies said that in the United States of America, racism and bigotry and segregation are not acceptable. And hundreds of thousands and millions of people stood up and fought back. We still have a long way to go, but that is how change takes place. So when people tell you, we can't do this, we can't do that, all that they are saying is that they don't have the guts to take on the powerful special interests who are preventing that change from occurring. We do. Before I go any further, I just had the honor of meeting with a number of Arab American leaders right here in Dearborn. And what I want to say is that if there is anything we are going to accomplish together, is we are going to end bigotry in this country. The Donald Trumps and his friends are not going to prevail in scapegoating minorities in this country. They are not going to be successful in attacking and denigrating our Muslim friends and neighbors. Friends and neighbors. They are not going to divide us up. What we all know, and I speak as somebody with some personal experience in this. My dad was an immigrant. My dad came to this country without a penny in his pocket, couldn't speak English, from Poland at the age of 17. Never made much money. But he loved this country because of the opportunities that he gave him and the ability to raise two of his kids, first in the family to actually go to college. That's what America is about. We will not let Trump divide us up. We will come together. This campaign is doing something very, very radical in American politics. It is called telling the truth. And the truth is not always pleasant, and I wish I could tell you just wonderful things. But it is important for us to understand reality. Because if we do not understand that reality, it is in fact impossible for us to go forward. Let me tell you has to be done to deal with the enormous problems facing the middle class and working families of this country, no president can do it alone.
Right.
That is not just rhetoric. That is not just words. That is reality. And you know why that is true? Because, and again, no other candidate for president will tell you this, the people who have the power in this country, the billionaire class, Wall Street, corporate America, the corporate media who determine what we see and what we hear, the large campaign contributors who have so much influence over the political process. No one can defeat this group of people because they have so much power alone. No president can do it. The only way we do defeat them and create an America that works for us all rather than the few is when millions of people stand up, fight back, and demand to have a government which represents all of us, not just the 1%. Working people, bring young people, bring people who have given up on the political process back into that process so they can stand up and fight for their kids and their parents and their own lives. Yesterday I saw something that was enormously touching to me. It was a caucus in Maine. There were photographs on the internet of a line a half-mile long. Half-mile long of people waiting hours to get in to cast their vote. We won Maine with 64%. And the largest voter turnout in the history of Maine caucuses. Now, we had similar results in Kansas. In other words, here is what's happening. If we allow the same old to continue, you're going to get the same old results. And those same old results will be the rich get richer, middle class continues to disappear, and too many of our people live in poverty. If we want to change that same old, we have to understand that politics is not a football game. Football is a spectator sport. We watch great athletes do their things. Politics in democracy means that every single one of us has to be actively involved in determining Tomorrow is a very important day here in Michigan. It is your primary. If there is a large voter turnout, we will win. As Keith said, bring your family members, bring your co-workers, bring your neighbors. Let's show the establishment that we are not satisfied with the status quo. We want real change. Obviously, my opponent tomorrow on the ballot is going to be Secretary Clinton. And let me just speak for a moment about some of the differences that exist between Secretary Clinton and myself. And number one, in this country today, we have a corrupt campaign finance system. And as a result of Citizens United, what we have seen is the emergence of a whole lot of super PACs into which billionaires, Wall Street, corporate America are putting huge amounts of money. Now, Secretary Clinton has several super PACs. Her largest recently reported that in the last filing period, she raised $25 million, including $15 million from Wall Street. Secretary Clinton has also gone behind closed doors to talk to some of the major Wall Street financial institutions. She gets paid $225,000 per speech. Not bad for a day's work. Now, I kind of figure that if you're going to get paid $225,000 to give a speech, it must be a brilliant speech. And if it is such a brilliant speech, surely you're going to want to share that brilliant speech with the people of America. Secretary Clinton also said that, she would release the transcripts if other people would release their transcripts. Here it is, I'm ready to release my transcripts. Are you ready? Here it is, you got it. No speeches for election. Now, we on the other hand have taken a different approach in how we raise funds. And how we do it is to go to working families and middle-class people. And what's happened over the last 10 months has been absolutely amazing and mind-blowing. We now have received 5 million individual campaign contributions. That is more individual campaign contributions than any candidate in the history of the United States of America. Anybody here know what the average campaign contribution is? $27. $27. So to quote Abraham Lincoln in Gettysburg, this is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, there's another issue that separates Secretary Clinton from myself. And that is, all of you are aware that in America today, our middle class is shrinking. Almost all new income and wealth go to the top 1%. You are aware that many of the new jobs being created pay wages that are just too low. Now, there are a lot of factors for that, but one of the major reasons is that for the last 30 years, we've had a series of disastrous trade policies written by corporate America. But these trade policies are, whether it's NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, or others, the basic principle was the following. Corporate America will help write these trade agreements. They were saying, why should I pay a worker in Michigan or Vermont a decent wage with decent benefits, negotiate with the union, and have to obey environmental legislation? When I can go to Mexico, I can go to China, I can pay people pennies an hour. That is what they wanted, and that is what they have accomplished because of these disastrous trade agreements. In this country, in the last 15 years, we have seen the loss of 60,000 factories in America. 60,000 factories and millions of decent paying jobs. While not all of that is attributable to trade, a lot of it is. All of you know of factories and communities all over this country shut down, workers thrown out on the street, factory went to Mexico, factory went to China, or some other low-wage country. Hillary Clinton has supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade policies. I have opposed every one of these policies. her positions on trade, Secretary Clinton announced that I was an opponent of the bailout of the automobile industry, which is so important here in Michigan and in many, many other states. That is absolutely untrue. There was one vote in terms of whether or not we bailed out the automobile industry in the Senate. December 11th, 2008, I voted for that bailout in support of the workers in the automobile industry. To say otherwise is to not say the truth. Now there's another area of huge consequence between difference of opinion between Secretary Clinton and myself, and that has to do with foreign policy. In 2002, the Congress debated the most important foreign policy issue in the modern history of this country. I listened very carefully to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney had to say about going to war in Iraq. I not only voted against that war, I helped lead the opposition to going to war in Iraq. Pleasure to tell you that much of what I feared would happen is exactly what did happen in terms of the chaos and instability in that region, which has led us to where we are today. Now, Secretary Clinton heard the same evidence that I heard. She voted for that disastrous war. Now, you know, it is very easy when you're a politician to point out what is true, is there are a lot of terrible, terrible dictators and demagogues all over this world. And Gaddafi of Libya certainly is one of them. But it is not just enough to say that Gaddafi was a tyrant and a dictator. Before you make a decision about overthrowing him, you got to be thinking about what happens the day after he is gone. Regime change does not always work out quite as smoothly as some people think it does. Series of articles in the New York Times recently that made the point the president wasn't quite sure what to do about Libya. Secretary Clinton was one of the more aggressive people to say we've got to go in and overthrow Gaddafi. The result is history, and it is not a good history. Massive instability in Libya. ISIS now has a foothold in that country today. Point being that regime change is more complicated and often has unintended consequences. We've got to be careful about that. Foreign policy is another issue, and I wish I could come before you and tell you that I have a magical solution. I don't. And that is, for decades now, there has been hatred and warfare in the Middle East. Everybody knows it. We've had some presidents, Carter, Clinton, others, who tried to do their best to resolve it. All I can tell you is I will make every single effort to bring rational people on both sides together, so that hopefully we can have, through a level playing field, the United States treating everybody in that region equally, hopefully. Know that there are people of goodwill in Israel and in the Arab communities. This is not an easy task, but it is a task that we must pursue. We cannot continue to have, for another 60 years, the kind of hatred and conflict that exists in the world. Now, this campaign is doing as well as it is winning caucus after caucus, because we are listening to the American people rather than just wealthy campaign contributors. We are listening to workers who tell us they cannot make it on $9 or $10 an hour. That's not enough money for one person, let alone to raise a family. And that is why when we think big and when we determine that in America, no worker working 40 hours a week should live in poverty, we know that we got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. This campaign is listening to senior citizens and disabled veterans. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, but by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. There are millions of seniors and disabled veterans in this country who are trying to get by on $11,000 to $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? Nobody can get by on $11,000 to $12,000 a year Social Security. And unbelievably, there are Republicans out there who actually want to cut Social Security. So I've got some very bad news for them. Not only are we not going to cut Social Security, we are going to expand Social Security. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are telling me is, how does it happen that I end up $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 in debt because I simply wanted to get the best education that I could? Now again, this is what Keith Ellison was saying. We have got to think outside of the status quo. We all take it for granted. Millions of people in this country are deeply in debt for the crime of getting a higher education. You know what? That's pretty crazy.
It is.
That is not right. What we want to do is to encourage every American to be able to get all of the education that they need, not punish people for getting an education. This may seem radical, but women's rights were considered radical. Gay rights were considered radical. Workers' rights were considered radical. So here is the idea. The idea is that for many, many years, the idea of public education, free public education, being first grade to 12th grade, was a great idea. Because 40, 50 years ago, you graduated high school, you know what? You could go out there and get a pretty good job. The world has changed. And today, in many respects, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 years ago. So it seems to me we've got to do three things. Number one, in the year 2016, we have got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Is this a radical idea? No. It's not radical. It is absolutely common sense. The world has changed. New type of education is needed to deal with the new technologies and complicated world out there. People need different types and more education. Second of all, you got countries like Germany, Scandinavia. That's exactly what they're doing today. Third thing, this will shock some of you. 50, 60 years ago, guess what? Public colleges and universities in the United States of America were virtually tuition free. This is not a radical idea, it's exactly what we should do. Second thing we should do is that people are carrying heavy student debt. We've got to lower that debt by allowing them to refinance. Now, as you know, 2008, after Wall Street's reckless and illegal behavior drove this economy into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the Congress bailed out Wall Street. Bailed out the wealthiest and most powerful institution in America. Well, I think that now what we need to do is impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. Which will raise the money we need to lower student debt and make public colleges and universities tuition free.
Congratulations, we're sending you to college.
Now it is Wall Street's turn to help.
30,000.
This campaign is listening to women. And what women are saying is, how does it happen that they sit in an office or a factory and they end up making 79 cents on the dollar compared to the guy who's in the other room? And I know that every man in this room will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity for women. Listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And what they are telling us is that we have a broken criminal justice system. Which ends up having more people in jail than any other country on earth.
Yes.
Absurdly. We are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million Americans, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. Now, one of the reasons for that is that youth unemployment in this country is outrageously high. For young whites, 33% for high school graduates, Latinos, 36%. African Americans, 51%. You want to hear a radical idea? All right, here's the radical idea. We're going to invest in education and jobs for our young people, not jails and incarceration. Is listening to our Latino brothers and sisters. And what they are telling us is that they are tired of living in fear, living in the shadows, and I agree with them when they say we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship.